Please marry me." The trembling words broke the heavy silence of the damp mountain cabin, spilling from the lips of a woman who had come farther than anyone believed possible. She stood there with her suitcase, thin from hunger and heavy from the journey, staring at the man the whole valley called a beast. A man they said had locked himself away after tragedy. A man no one dared to approach. His eyes were wild, his beard unkempt, and his presence alone felt like the roar of thunder trapped in a cage. Yet she, a mail-order bride who had nothing left to lose, looked into those eyes with trembling courage, knowing that this moment would decide her fate. Would he break her fragile hope into pieces? Or would the caged mountain man finally hear the desperate plea for love buried under her simple words? If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the healing power of love, please like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with friends, and subscribe to today's stories. Your support keeps these powerful journeys alive. She had traveled across oceans and broken roads, leaving behind the dust of a war-torn city that had taken everything from her: her parents, her little brother, even her sense of safety. All she had was the letter, stained with time and the ink of desperation. A letter from a man who had once placed an ad in a Lonely Hearts agency. It was supposed to be simple. She would come, he would give her shelter, and together they might find some scrap of happiness in a world that had stolen too much from them. But when she arrived, the townsfolk only shook their heads and whispered warnings. Don't go to him. He's dangerous. He's half mad. The stories painted him as a monster who scared away even the wolves, a man who hadn't spoken to another soul in years. Yet her heart told her something different, that maybe broken souls were meant to find each other, even if it meant stepping into the lion's den. The cabin door had creaked open like a warning, the air thick with the smell of smoke and solitude. Inside, the man stood like a shadow carved from stone, his back bent with grief and his eyes burning with unspoken torment. He had once been a husband, once a father, until fate stole it all in a single night of fire and storm. Since then, he had built his own prison, walls of wood and silence, shutting out anyone who tried to come near. And now, before him stood a stranger, a woman too fragile for this wilderness, holding out not just her hands, but her heart. Her words pierced through the silence like the first crack of light in a long winter. Please marry me. He should have laughed. He should have thrown her out. But something in her voice, something in her eyes, made him hesitate, made the bars around his soul tremble. The days that followed were not easy. She cooked small meals with trembling hands, often in silence, while he sat across from her like a storm cloud refusing to break. The townsfolk came once, warning her to leave before he destroyed her too. But she stayed. Not because she was foolish, but because she saw through his anger to the wound beneath it. She had known hunger. She had known loss. She had known the way grief could hollow a person until nothing was left. And every time she caught him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking, she knew there was still something left inside him, something worth saving. Her persistence became her language of love, sweeping the dusty floor, singing quietly in a voice that shook, planting flowers outside the cabin so one day he might wake up to beauty instead of emptiness. Slowly, the cage began to open. He started speaking. Not much, just a word here, a sentence there. His voice was gravelly, as though unused for years, but it carried a weight that pulled her closer. He confessed, in fragments, the story of his wife and daughter, how they were swallowed by the storm, how he never forgave himself for failing them. She listened, not with pity, but with the quiet strength of someone who knew what it meant to have the world collapse around you. In her silence, he found permission to grieve, and in his grief, she found the courage to keep asking, keep waiting, keep believing that someday his heart would open enough to let her in. But the mountain was not merciful. Winter came like a predator, burying the cabin in snow and trapping them inside. Supplies ran low, and one night, when the fire nearly died, he saw her shivering with blue lips as she tried to hide her own hunger so he might eat instead. Something in him broke then, not in anger, but in love. For the first time in years, he reached out, pulled her close, and whispered words he thought he'd never say again. Stay alive. For me. It was then he realized that the woman who had begged him to marry her was not weak. She was the only person brave enough to fight for him when he had stopped fighting for himself. The thaw of spring mirrored the thaw of his heart. He began working again, fixing the roof, chopping wood, teaching her the ways of the mountain, and she, with her gentle persistence, filled the cabin with warmth it had not known since before the tragedy. When the townsfolk came again, they no longer warned her. They stared in disbelief at the man who now stood tall beside her, no longer a beast, but a man reborn. The mountain had not defeated him. Love had reached through the cage and pulled him back into the light. On a day when the wildflowers stretched across the hills, he took her to the edge of the valley where the wind carried the scent of pine and freedom. He held her trembling hands, the same hands that had once knocked on his cabin door, and with a voice steadier than ever, he asked her the words she once begged of him. Will you marry me? And when she nodded through her tears, the mountains themselves seemed to echo their vow. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to today's stories. Your support helps us bring more inspiring and emotional journeys to life.